1078 officer in need.
What's up, guys? It's Matt from the 1078 Project. Hey, if you're new to the organization, a little bit about us. The 1078 Project is a non-profit organization that's been founded and developed by law enforcement officers who have been involved in critical incidents and officer-involved shootings. Our goal at the 1078 Project is to provide mental, spiritual, and practical support to law enforcement officers as they navigate the difficult times surrounding an officer-involved shooting. With that being said, let's dive into today's episode, and I'll see you on the other side, boys. Welcome back to the podcast. Today's guest is my best friend. She's a neonatal intensive care nurse. She's the best mom that I know and the best wife that I know. Today's guest is my wife, Katelyn Frkovic. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. Today's guest is my better half. This is already weird. This is the weirdest episode that I've ever recorded. We don't normally sit down with microphones in front of us to talk, but I'm excited to have you on. I'm excited to hear, for our audience to hear your story and I guess my incident from your point of view. So welcome in. How's it feel?
Very weird.
Yeah. Well, take a deep breath. It'll all be all right. And I want people to know who you are because you're my favorite person in the whole world. And I think people like to hear your perspective, and maybe some of the police wives will pick up something from what you talk about or how you feel or whatever else. So
yeah, that's why we started this. I'm excited to what we're coming up on a year of 1078. So I'm excited for people to know like who we are and like how we got here.
Yeah, we're just two weirdos trying to make it,
Speak for yourself.
trying to make something really positive happen. But let's learn a little bit about you. So I won't go all the way back to your childhood, but let's kind of start where we met. How's that? I know you don't want to tell your
Dairy
entire
Queen drive-through.
Yeah, I know you don't want to tell your entire story, but
Yeah, nobody wants to hear that.
let's start where we met. We did meet in a Dairy Queen drive-through, so I'll let you take it from here.
Okay. It's been 11 years
Today.
today since our first date. Since our first date.
Yeah.
The Dairy Queen drive-through was probably a week prior to that, or a couple days, something like that. So, yeah, I mean, we were set up on a blind date. Somebody I worked with was dating or getting married to somebody you worked with, and they both knew we were both single and needed
I don't know
somebody
if
special,
needed.
looking for somebody special for their life, and they were like, let's set these two kiddos up. And you took me out for ice cream. You came up to the door when you picked me up.
I think the first thing was the whole audience should know that she didn't think I was attractive. So we went through. It was a day at work, and I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna come see you." So she worked at the Dairy Queen that was in the city that I worked in as a policeman. So I went through the drive-through. I can't remember what I ordered, but got some food and then went around through the drive-through, and she didn't. I don't know. I think it made her 10 times more nervous.
You had been texting me, and we had, I think, talked on the phone a couple times, and we were getting to our date, and you came through the drive-through. I'd never seen you before, and you left, and I was like, oh, no. I was like, now I have to go on a date with that guy. But you were like in your uniform and like a patrol car. Like I couldn't see you that well. It was night. But yeah, that was my first reaction was like,
excuses.
Oh no. And then you came to pick me up though, and you got out of the car. And I remember sitting in the living room like peeking through the windows. And my mom was in there with me, and I see you get out, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's what he's wearing? And my mom was like, just relax. Like, he hasn't even come up to the door yet. Like, give him a chance. And I was like, okay.
So harsh.
I know. I don't think I was really ready to, like, date at that time. I was, like, I was reluctant to go out with you. But my friend kept pushing me to, like, go out and meet somebody. But I was kind of okay doing my own thing at the time. So, anyways, you pick me up, you say hi to my mom, and we get in the car, and we're, like, not even down the end of the street. And I just, like, settled in. I think you settled in. We just immediately started talking, and it was like, I feel like I've known this person my whole life.
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
Yeah.
Like, I never had an experience like that where I was like, okay, something special here.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't just the average date.
Yeah.
And I think the whole date was kind of like that.
Yeah, very.
It was like I don't know. Things just seemed to click. And from that point, we were pretty much inseparable.
Oh, yeah.
You were young at that point. So what were your thoughts going into dating a policeman?
I didn't, like, think anything of it. Like, and one, it was never something I considered. I didn't really know I had an uncle that was a police officer, but it was just kind of just normal to me. Like, I don't know it, but I never, people that are like, I want to date a police officer. And
they call those badge bunnies.
Yeah,
honey.
You have a name for them. And it's like, I never considered it. And then we started dating, and it seemed just separate to me. It was like, that's just his job. And then when you're not at work, you're Matt, not a police officer. So
I feel like it was like that for a long time. I think you had that view for a really long time, where it was like there's two different versions. I mean, I think cops kind of have that. I don't know, cops that I think successfully, like stay cops, I think they kind of do that. I think they kind of separate like work and home life.
Yeah, I mean, I guess looking back now, like, I think that was all you. Like, you did that. I never felt like I was dating a cop, because when I was with you, you were just Matt. You weren't a cop. You weren't always on as a cop, Mm-hmm. And there's people that, like, some cops, so when you're around them and they're not on duty, they're not being a cop at the moment, but you're like, you're totally a cop,
mm-hmm.
And you weren't like that. So I think it's very easy for me to just kind of forget that you were a cop when we were together.
Yeah, I think cops carry around like a certain level of intensity with them all the time. And that's a big thing when I talk to Montana, like, life is balance, right? Like, like he says that all the time, like, life is balance. Like, there's times to be the police officer, there's times to be the husband, there's times to be the dad, and not all those times coexist very often. Like, the balance is sometimes you're the dad, sometimes you're the cop, sometimes you're the husband. Like, should be balanced in every single one of those different areas. But I don't know if we did that on purpose. I don't know. I definitely don't think that I did that on purpose, because I was so young and so dumb, like 21 years old as a policeman. I couldn't believe that they even allowed me to. Looking back, sometimes I still can't believe that I was a cop at 21, But it kind of slowed us down, because I don't think we really, like, most 21-year-olds are, like, going out and partying all the time and having a bunch of fun.
Yeah, you had, a serious job, and you worked shift work. Like, you were working nights, or you were working afternoons at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You were always tired.
Yeah. Nothing's changed.
Yeah. Now I'm right there with you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we dated for how long before we got engaged?
We met in
2 years?
August of 2013, and then December of 2014, you proposed at Christmas time.
Yeah. Pretty awesome.
It was a surprise. I couldn't believe you got me.
Yeah. It was a surprise, and I don't even think I actually asked you to marry me, because I started crying, but.
Yeah, you did not get the words out. It was like, and then I hugged you, and everybody's like, what'd she say? And I was like, oh, yes.
Yeah, I don't think I even said I don't think I said anything, really. I think I tried to.
You started to say, I love you more than anything in the world.
Yeah.
And then you were just like, lost it.
Whoops.
So I was just focused on the ring.
Yeah. I thought I did.
I was like, there's a ring in front of me. What is happening?
I thought I did good on the ring.
You did phenomenal.
So what happens from there?
We got married.
And then everything went to poop.
No, it was great. We were living life. We got pregnant with our first daughter like a year after we got married. Started having babies. I was going to nursing school, just chugging along.
Mm-hmm.
I think then you got the dog. You started in canine.
That was, I think, a pretty big thing for us.
Yeah,
like,
and you started doing like
everything.
I think that's when everything kind of switched for me. If I had to pinpoint a time, like your job became more serious to me. You were doing more intense stuff at work. You were talking more about the calls you were going on. And I think that's when I started to develop like a little bit of anxiety when you would like leave for a shift and stuff, or like hearing about the calls you would go to or what you and the dog were doing. And, that you were doing more stuff with drugs and stuff because you had a dog that could detect drugs. And, then I started thinking about like drug dealers and bad people, and like these are the people you're coming in contact. And I think from that time on is when I really started to like feel like, that law enforcement wife status type thing and all the stuff that comes with it.
Was it like, obviously I've only been on the police officer side, I've never been on the other, like the spouse side. Like, what was it like when I would leave for a night shift? What was it like? Like, what was like your average thought? Did you like think about it like, oh, or was it? Because sometimes I think like you were like blissfully ignorant sometimes until we had like.
I think I was for sure. But like when you start to develop anxiety about something, your mind just kind of like runs wild with things. And so I didn't really know, I didn't know what you were doing or what kind of calls you were going on, because I think you protected me a lot. But I would just picture you like, things you see on TV and those kinds of scenarios. And like when you were gone at night and it's in the middle of the night and there's not a lot of people around at night. And it's like you start to get worried, like, what if something happens? What if he's on a traffic stop and somebody ambushes him and there's nobody around to witness it? Those kinds of things. And then your mind just like boom, 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 boom. And you get down this like dark rabbit hole.
I think I really did try to avoid telling you a lot for probably the first like at least half of my career. Like I didn't really want to talk to you about a lot of things. Number one, I don't think I really knew how to talk about a lot of those things.
Yeah.
And number two is like, I don't know. Sometimes I felt like you were delicate and I didn't want to like, like throw you into this world that you didn't know existed.
I live in a bubble and I watch Disney movies in my free time. So
yeah, I didn't want to like throw you. I didn't want to throw you to the wolves. Like I didn't want to open your eyes to like some of the stuff that I was doing at work. So I just didn't really talk about it and I kind of avoided it. And then now like going to all these like trainings and everything, I was like, open up, talk to your wife about things. Like she needs to know what you do at work. And obviously that's a case by case basis, but do you like looking back, would you have rather me been a little bit more open about what I was doing, or?
Just from knowing what we know now, since doing 1078 and like getting immersed in like the mental health world and specifically like the police mental health world, and just, knowing what we know now, I do think we should have had a better line of communication about your job and like what you were doing. And you should have been able to open up to me more. Cause it would have been good for you. And I, there were times I remember where you would be like starting to tell me about a call and I'd be like, I don't want to hear that. Stop.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really bothered me. Like I've had some guilt about that over like the last couple years, probably more specifically the last year, like the more I've gotten to know about things and how it should be, as a spouse for someone like for a first responder, that you should be able to come home and like decompress and stuff. And I feel bad that there were times that, I look back and I'm like, man, there were times that was probably really hard, like a call you were, or a child case or something that you were on, and you probably just wanted to like get it off your chest and just say it out loud or something. And I would shut you down and be like, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, I think that's a two-way street, because I think maybe sometimes like I wasn't very educated in what I was saying, so I would just tell you, like, from my perspective. It was like, it looked like this, and this happened, and that was like, and you can't do that. You know, like, you don't want to know. You don't want to know the details of things. Like, it's just, and I think that's a balancing act for every relationship, depending on the people that are involved. But some people, like, yeah, maybe it's okay to tell them everything. Like, a lot of cops are married to other cops, you know, or they're married to, like, paramedics or whatever else. So it wouldn't have the same effect. And, like, now, you know, like, since the beginning of our relationship, you've became a nurse, so, like, your overall maturity and, like, ability to see things has changed too. So now I can kind of, like, I feel more comfortable talking to you about things. But
I think that, like, changed a lot in our relationship too. Was, like,
I think so too.
You didn't. I remember going, like, through nursing school.
Public safety.
Well, and going through nursing school, you were like, "Are you sure you can do this?" Because you did see me as such, like, an innocent, fragile person. And you were like, I don't know if you're going to be able to handle, like, the stuff you're going to have to see. And I knew myself, like, that I compartmentalized, you know, when it came to that kind of work. And
you surprise me sometimes.
Yeah, like, that is the one thing I'm able to compartmentalize is work. And, like, when I would go to the hospital and, like, see things and do things, I was able to just leave it there. And I'm not like that with anything else. Like, I have a hard time compartmentalizing things except for work for some reason and being a nurse. And so that, I think that really changed a lot when I went through with it. And you were like, and I was doing the thing, and you were like, wow, like, okay.
I just felt like you were less delicate. I was like, okay, well, like, she can handle a little bit more. Yeah,
it took our relationship as you as a first responder, and now me kind of, like, people kind of clump nurses.
Yeah, it's just public servants. Like, police, fire, teachers, nurses, they're all in that same, like, public service role. And unfortunately, when you're in a public service role, a lot of times that means you have to serve the public, which isn't always easy to do.
Well, and then even more specifically, you know, like, with medics and firefighters and police officers and nurses, you can have, like, a lot of traumatic incidences, and, like, you share that, you can bond over that.
Yeah. I think really, like, the thing that really bulletproofed our marriage was shortly after we had kids, shortly after we had Ella, like, a big change happened in our life. And I think that's kind of what bulletproofed our marriage and, like, kind of put us on the same, like, I think both of us doubled down and committed to each other in that time. So.
You want me to share that?
If you want to. It's up to you. So, sure.
Well, I mean, so.
And for, like, our viewing audience, this is really where the beginning of 1078 kind of started. Like, this is where.
Yeah, we have to kind of talk about that to get.
Yeah, this is, like, where our, I guess, walk with mental health really began.
Yeah.
So
in January of 2019, we lost my brother, who's 2 years younger than me, and he took his own life. And that just, like, rocked our world. And that was our first encounter with, like, mental health and mental illness. And I know before that, like, you didn't really have, like, a mindset or a heart for, like, mental illness. Like, you were a very stoic police officer.
Yeah, it's like I would go to, like, suicide calls, and I'd be like, oh, this person's, like, so selfish. Why would they do something like this?
And you saw it as, like, a weakness too sometimes. And you just, like, hadn't had, like, a personal connection to it. And so that really changed. I mean, that day changed the whole trajectory of our lives. And then, you know, that sent me into, like, a very deep and dark depression that we had to overcome as a couple. I was a new mom. I was trying to get into nursing school. I hadn't gotten into nursing school yet. So that was just a really hard time in our marriage.
It was.
And we, more so you, just, like, I think you committed. You were like, I was just kind of floating in space. and you saw me through it. And yeah, that like bulletproofed our marriage.
It's kind of one of those times where it was like, till death do us part. And it was like, well, I said it, but did I mean it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it got really, really bad for quite a long time. Like,
I mean, I'm still dealing with.
I think it was like 2 years, though, was probably pretty rough.
The thick of it was, the first 2 years. And, it opened my eyes to suicide, to mental illness. It opened your eyes. We had
I think that was
a very
the big
close
thing.
encounter with that.
I don't even know if it was losing Brendan, but that kind of opened my eyes to the mental health world, because I always thought so highly of you. You know, it's like, she's the best. Like, she's the nicest person I've ever met in my life. And then seeing you go through that, like, where you were suicidal, and like, it was like taking all the guns out of the house and giving you your medications like one pill at a time, was like, if this could happen to her, it could happen to anyone.
Yeah. And I think that same for me, like, seeing that happen to my brother, it was just like, oh my gosh. And suddenly your eyes are opened up to, like, now I have this like irrational fear of anytime I know somebody's going through something, or, I'm just hyper vigilant about, like, are you okay? Are you okay? Because I know what can happen, and I don't want anybody to go down a path where they are not okay and they end up doing that. And we've seen the other side of it, that we were the survivors of suicide. And so, like, we had to deal with everything that came after that. Like, his mental illness was just passed on to me, to my parents, to my brother, our other brothers that we had, to you. It just is passed along. And I think that's something that, like, you hyper focused on, was that, okay, with suicide, it's just like passed.
Yeah, I was so mad at your brother. I was like, dude, why did you do this? Like, because that's what I felt like. I felt like he just gave you all of his problems. It was like everything that was wrong with him was not wrong with you.
Yeah.
And it was a hard fix. And it, like, even, like we were going through with Ella, so you're still like having postpartum issues. And so you were already, your brain chemistry and the chemicals in your body were already a little out of whack, because you just had a baby.
A rough time.
And then
it was a lot.
I don't know. I think she was like 6 months old, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah.
I want to say 6 months old.
Yeah. She was just about to turn 7 months old when he died.
So you're already dealing with that. And then this whole thing is thrown on top of it.
Yeah. So we went through all that, like, we experienced suicide and mental illness, and trying to find healing and getting into, like, mental health. And I started seeing a counselor, and we're like getting involved in that stuff. And
I was like this straight up tool bag. I was like, in the back of my head, I was like willing to do anything for you to be better. Like, I would have done anything I could, but I was like thinking to myself, like, you're like, I'm going to start seeing a counselor. And I was thinking, like, okay, sure. You're like, this is going to fix it. Like,
yeah,
I'm sure this is going to fix it.
You had, like,
right?
there's stigmas and everything. And, like, you bought into all that, just like everybody else in the world. And everybody has their own perception until you, like, really go through that. And so then a few years later, you have your critical incident, and then suddenly you're getting, like, your own real encounter with, like, mental health.
Yeah. Yeah, it was bizarre.
Yeah.
And, like, I think to give myself a little bit of a break is, like, that's all I ever knew. Like, going into law enforcement was like, by that time, I don't even know how long I had been in law enforcement, like 7 years, maybe 7, 8 years, something like that. And, like, been on countless suicide scenes, been on countless dead bodies, car crashes, all kinds of bad stuff. And, like, we all just, like, nobody talked about it. Everybody just, like, hey, nut up and, go back to work. And it was always like, there was never a point in time where to be 100% honest, there's never really anything that bothered me. There's like a couple cases that I still remember that I was like, like stick with me, but I never felt like it really changed who I was as a person, you know? So like when you lost Brendan and you were going through everything, it was just, I didn't have a real understanding of like what mental health, like what a mental health battle really looked like. You didn't have any
personal experience to like have empathy.
Yeah.
And understand.
It was hard to be empathetic.
You couldn't put yourself in my shoes. It was just so foreign to you. You were just like, you have to keep going. Mm-hmm. And to me, it was like my whole world just turned upside down. Like somebody I deeply love is just now gone.
Yeah.
And my world was just crumbling. And, you know, I don't know I'm not a mental health professional, but like my brain was just like, I didn't know what was happening inside of my own head. And you sure as heck didn't know what was going on in my head. But so you were so strong and stoic. That was just who you were. And you just always persevered and pushed through. And you're somebody that you always see the positive in things. Like anytime there's something negative, you're like, where's the positive? Mm-hmm. That's just who you are. And you hadn't gone through something that like ever made you see the negative. You just hadn't had that happen yet. And that's great. Like that means you had a pretty good life. And up until I lost Brendan, I had never really dealt with depression or severe anxiety, like debilitating anxiety. So then you had your critical incident. And I mean, we're not going to talk about your incident, but like that night, you know, coming home and like,
there will be a time that we talk about the critical incidents just for people that
it's still
are listening. There's a possibility for like, you know, civil litigation and all kinds of other stuff. So just to protect.
One day I'll interview you about your critical incident.
Yeah, just to protect our family. And it's best that I don't release too many details on.
But we can talk about afterwards. Yeah. And so I think it's important for you to share with everybody, like, and you kind of have here and there, but like, so what happened that night?
Sorry to interrupt the episode, but we got some big, exciting things happening with 1078. As you guys know, we sell merch, and that's been going pretty well. We decided to drop 2 more T-shirts, one of which I think you guys will think is hilarious. Head over to the website, www.1078project.com. Click the merch button. It will take you to our merch store, where you can purchase a shirt. Just so you guys know, all the proceeds from those shirts, all the profits from those shirts are getting donated back to the nonprofit, and it's a way for us to continue to do the work that we have been doing. Also, we have big news as well. We're having a trivia night. It's on 9/20. If you're looking to attend the trivia night, again, go to the website, www.1078project.com. Go to the events tab, and you can register. All the information that you'll need is there. Guys, this is a really big deal to us. This is the way that we fund all of our operations. If you're a business, you're looking to sponsor the trivia night, again, you can reach out to us, or you can go to the website, to the event tab. All of our contact information will be on there. Hit us up. We'd love to have your support. We've also loved to have you guys at the trivia night. I'll stop talking so we can get back to the episode.
Started yelling at me about laundry detergent.
I think that was like 2 days later, actually, that I yelled at you about laundry detergent.
No, it was that night.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes that's a blur. So that day was like a really long day. It was like a day shift, and then I worked until that night. I don't think we got home until like 11-ish, somewhere, 11:30. So literally all I wanted to do was sleep. Like I just wanted to go to sleep so bad. I was so tired. I had my giant adrenaline dump, and then I was kind of like coming down from that adrenaline dump, and I just wanted to go to sleep. But we laid in bed and like talked a little bit, and I was feeling really good about everything until I met with my attorney that night. And then it was kind of like, that was kind of like the thing that kind of freaked me out. Not necessarily that I was 100% confident in the decision that I made, but just the way that she worded everything that was going on,
I think you were pretty confident that you made the right choice.
I wasn't pretty confident. I was 100% confident that I made the right choice. It was, but just listening to like the way that the attorney kind of broke things down was like, I think she just wanted me to take everything seriously. So she was like, hey, I just want to let you know you're a suspect in a homicide. The state's going to come after you. You're going to be civilly sued. And when you think it's all over, the federal government's going to come after you. And I think that's when, like, I realized, like, my God, what just happened? You know, like, that's when things kind of set in, like, to reality of, like, yeah, I made the right decision, but, like, this decision has a bunch of long-term.
Yeah, what comes after
Yeah,
this
like
now.
a bunch of long-term implications that nobody ever really prepared me for. Like, nobody ever told me, hey, this is going to happen, or, you know, this is how the whole situation's going to go from this point on. I was, like, blissfully like, hey, I'm a policeman and I did what I was supposed to do in this specific call, and that's my job, and I mentally prepared myself for that likelihood.
You've trained. And
yeah, thousands of times. I've been on so many different calls.
You knew what to do.
Yeah, like, and I was confident, but, you know, I thought I had like almost like a Darren Wilson-esque moment of like, oh my God, like, I feel like I made all the right decisions, but does that matter? Like, does it matter that I made all the right decisions? I remember
you, like, going home that night and you were just like, what did I do to my family? Like, what have I just done to you and the kids? And so you started experiencing for the first time ever in your life anxiety. And that night you're laying in bed and you started.
I couldn't sleep. Like, I was like rolling around. I don't know. I probably rolled around for 3 or 4 hours. Like, I wanted to sleep so bad. Like, I wanted to go to bed so bad, and I just couldn't. Like, my brain would not shut off. Like, I kind of tell people, like, when I talk about it now, it's like, you know, if you look at your speedometer, it has all the RPMs, and I felt like I revved up all the way to, 9,000 RPMs, and it wasn't like a car where it just went back down. It was like, it took a long time for my brain and my body to shut back off, like, and get back to, like, I don't know, that level of, like, homeostasis or whatever. But for those, like, 3 or 4 hours I was rolling around in bed, is like the incident was just playing in my head over and over and over and over and over and over. Like, I don't know how many times it replayed in my head, but it was at least hundreds, you know. It's like over and over.
But I think, like, the thing that you were worried about was what your attorney said, not so much.
Yeah, it was like, it was just, I think I was
incident.
Super worried about what my attorney said, but I think I was having a reaction. Like, now I know this is very common. Like, that's a very common reaction to, like, going through a super stressful or traumatic incident. Is your brain is trying to piece all that back together. And what better way to do that than put it on replay and start putting all the Polaroids in the right places, right? But I didn't want it to do that. You know, like, I just wanted to go to bed so bad. Like, I was tired of it. Yeah, I just want to go to sleep.
I just want to shut my brain off.
And I can't remember if that was that night or I don't think it was that first night. I think it was like the second night that I had that anxiety thing, because the first night, like, I laid in bed and I prayed like I had never prayed ever before in my entire life. You know, like, I prayed like I was, like, begging for water in a third world country. Like,
you were desperate.
Like the most vulnerable and desperate I'd ever prayed. And I had a super profound spiritual experience that night, and, like, I just fell asleep. Like, it was, even to this day, sometimes when I talk about it, I'm like thinking to myself, like, that didn't really happen, you know, because it was, for those of you that listen, like, I try specifically not to over spiritualize things. Like, I'm not like,
you're not that guy.
No, I'm not that guy. You know, I'm not the guy who's like, everything is this
guy.
Yeah, everything this is like super profound spiritual thing, and, like, I'm really not that guy. Like, I try to, I don't know, I've always been like a very analytical, like,
very spiritual, here you go, here's this profound spiritual moment.
Yeah, it's like I'm very analytical, and, like, when I hear other people say that they had moments like I had, I'm like, sure, bro, like, all right. But I legitimately did. Like, I legitimately had this moment, and I still to this day have no explanation for it other than God. But I just fell asleep. And I woke up the next morning, and I think this is really where 1078 was founded, was in the kitchen of our house the next day, and, like, walking out, and, you know, I think both of us were, like, equally lost that morning.
Well, let's go back to
what, are you running this thing now?
Let's go back to, like, right immediately after your incident.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just like walk through our time.
Yeah. So right after I left my phone in the car because I always do, but I left my phone in the car, and after everything was said and done, I was getting ready to get transported to the hospital, and I was like, oh no, like I was thinking to myself, like Kate's gonna like hear about this. Like she's gonna see it on the news, somebody's gonna call her, like she's not gonna be able to get a hold of me, she's gonna freak out. So I asked one of the guys that I work with, hey, bro, can you go grab your phone? I just want to call Kate and let her know I'm okay. So I called you. I don't remember exactly how the conversation went. I think I just said, hey, I just want to let you know I was involved.
Oh, I remember.
I just want to let you know I was involved in an officer-involved shooting, and I think you asked if I was okay. And I said, yeah, and I think you asked if the other person was okay, and I said no. And then I could hear the stress in your voice, like I could hear you spinning up on the other side of the phone. And
I was at work.
I think you asked a couple other questions, and that was like the extent of it. And I was like, I gotta go, which is if you're ever, for anybody listening, like take that time, like make sure you choose your words. Yeah, make sure you choose your words wisely. Maybe come up with a plan with your significant other before you're ever involved in something like this. But, I was still in like work mode, Matt. Like all this stuff had just happened. I knew I had to go do a bunch of other things. I was like, I got to get off the phone with you. Like,
yeah, like I think the extent of your consideration for me was I have to call her and let her know.
Then I'm okay.
And then that like you didn't know, you weren't really, your brain could not think about like you were still work Matt. Like you weren't like husband Matt. And you were like not considering what you were saying to me and how it was going to affect me. And you were just like, okay, I got to go.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I have to go. Like,
I felt like I had like 20 or 30 seconds, and like, that's about it. They were like loading us up into an ambulance. They were going to take us to the hospital. So it was like, I didn't really have that much time. So I was trying to the biggest thing I wanted you to know is that I was fine.
Right.
That I was okay. That, I wasn't dead.
Yeah. And I mean, and so then from my perspective, getting that phone call, all rationale says like, he's on the phone with you. He's speaking to you. He's alive. He's well. It's fine. But you're hearing words like, I was just in an officer-involved shooting. And you like, to me, it was just like, I need to see you, like it didn't matter that you were on the phone with me. Like, I just like, my mind just started going to like the worst things. Obviously I knew you weren't injured or at least I was pretty sure you weren't injured. I knew you were alive, but my brain just started racing again. And I was at work. And so it was one of those things where I'm like, what do I do? I'm at work. I can't just like leave. I did, but, yeah, I mean, and you were like, I could tell you were kind of panicked too on the phone. And so then that like heightened my senses.
Yeah. I think I don't know if I was panicked cause I felt right afterwards, I felt like I had calmed down pretty significantly. I think I was just so anxious to be able to try and tell you.
Yeah.
I think I was like super nervous to be
like I could hear the emotion in your voice and I was just like, I need to be with him.
Yeah. I knew you were going to freak out. Yeah. I knew you were going to like lose it. And I was like,
I think it was definitely, it made
like
a world of difference
side was like,
to hear you call me, to have you call me. Like if somebody else would have told me, that would have been, I think, way worse. So it definitely helped that you were the one making the phone call and like informing me. And so then I immediately like went to the charge nurse and I was like, I had just gotten floated up to a different unit and was like about to get report. And I had to go back to the charge nurse and I was like, actually, I have to go. And they looked at me like, yeah, do? Like, yeah, okay. And I was like, no, my husband's a police officer. He was just in a shooting and I need to go. And they were like, okay, bye. And so I went back down to my unit. And by the time I got back down to my unit, I was a mess. Like, I found my charge nurse for my unit, and I was, like, just losing it. And she was like, she was like thinking you were dead or something. Like, is he okay? And I was like, I sound ridiculous right now. Like, I'm like, okay, yeah, he called me. He's okay. But I need to go. And so they let me leave. And the other part of that was that I was 14 weeks pregnant with our youngest.
Yeah.
And then that completely like left my brain that I was pregnant. I was carrying and like in critical weeks of pregnancy, months of pregnancy, like everything.
How far along were you? I can't remember.
14, I think I was 14 weeks. Oof. So like, you know, just barely into your second trimester.
Yeah.
And I was just full-blown anxiety. Like, my heart was pounding. I'm breaking out in hives. I'm crying. I'm trying to get to my car. I'm calling my parents to tell them. And their first reaction is, Katie, you're pregnant. You have got to calm down. And I was like, whatever. Like, I totally, like, you were my priority. Like,
appreciate that.
But it's crazy to me that I did not even consider myself or the baby. Like, I was just like, that doesn't matter. And I'm trying to get to you. And it's a straight shot from my hospital to the hospital that they were taking you to. And I could not get there. I took probably every major highway in between the two hospitals.
You got there like right when we got there. So
I know, thankfully, but like.
Must have been speeding.
I was. I was like, and I was just, I mean, all over the place. But the other thing that was super awesome to me about our situation was that the second in command at your department called me personally.
Yeah, I got to take a step back real quick because not only, you know, that relationship, him calling you wasn't, I'm sure it's weird for some departments that like the second in command. And I don't work at a tiny department either. I work at like a big enough department. But when you were going through everything with your brother, that was my boss. That was like my direct boss at that point. He hadn't been promoted or anything. So that was my sergeant. And we had built like a pretty strong relationship. And he was like the one person that I worked with that I had to be honest with because through...
You had to leave work a lot.
Yeah, through...
Unannounced sometimes because I was losing it.
Yeah. There were like times where I'd come into work for like 15 minutes. You'd call me on the phone with a newborn baby.
Panicking.
And you'd be like, I'm not safe right now. And then I would freaking turn around, run code back home. And I'd literally be at work for like 45 minutes. And that dude, I don't know how he explained it.
Like,
yeah. I don't know how he explained it. I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know. Because it's I'm sure for him it wasn't an easy like explanation to everybody else at the police department. It's like, why does this dude come in to work twice a month and he's there for 10 minutes, then turn around and go home? But for some reason, he stood by us, and that was the same guy, you know, years later.
Now he's second in command.
Yeah, that's second in command. That's calling my wife, and I'm involved in an officer-involved shooting. So I think that was huge. You know, those relationships were very strong by that point.
That meant a lot. But that helped me a lot in that moment when I'm like panicking, trying to get to you, and he's calling me, and he's like, Katie, Matt's good. Everything's good. We're going to all meet at the hospital. So-and-so is going to call you, and they're going to make sure you know where to go, and we're going to get you to Matt. And it was like, that was all I wanted. Mm-hmm. And like that he knew that would be all that I needed and wanted, and he cared about that. And I hope that every department can do that when a guy isn't involved in a critical incident. I know it doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
But when it does, it makes all the difference to make sure that you make contact with their spouse and know that that is their priority to get to their officer.
Yeah, it's like those things, like you always hear that being a police officer is a brotherhood. And through my entire career, you know, there'd never been a time where I really felt like it was a brotherhood, you know? Mm-hmm. And that was one of those moments where, like, it felt like it was a brotherhood. It was like, that guy knows my wife. He knows her phone number. You know, he knows the type of person I am. And if it just felt comfortable, you know, like having him knowing that you were going to be in their hands, because I couldn't deal with it right now because I was busy with all this other stuff. It was good to know that there was some people behind the scenes that were taking care of things.
Yeah.
And like, even, I forgot, he even wrote you a letter whenever you were going through all this stuff with your brother too. Yeah. And like, super solid, but
yeah. Good person to have in command.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
We're
grateful.
Fortunate and grateful. Yeah. And I think that's something, I mean, that's my biggest testimony about our story and us going through your critical incident, is that we didn't have a horrible experience. Like, a lot of things were good, but how we got to 1078 is both of us thinking about how supported we were from certain people. And yeah, there were things that were bad and like that we thought about what could have been better, but there were a lot of good things and good people supporting us and just stuff that made it a lot easier. So we didn't have the worst experience out there. But we wanted, we started thinking about, there are officers involved in critical incidences and shootings all the time. And they don't have
the resources. A DM.
Yeah. A major that cares like that.
Or a department that cares like that.
A department that cares. And, with me, like, I was supposed to go back to work. I was working that weekend of your shooting, and I was supposed to work the next day. I called in sick, and then I was supposed to go back to work a couple days later. And
I think this is one of the biggest things that people don't realize, and this is one of the reasons why we do some of the things that we do, is at that point we had 2 kids and you were pregnant, and not that I was in a bad place, I just wasn't in like the right place, if that makes sense. Like, I wasn't like emotionally unstable.
And that's normal. That's acceptable.
Yeah.
But we had 2 small children, and I needed to go to work all day. I would be gone for 13, 14 hours sometimes for a shift. And that was so scary to leave you like with the kids. Not that I was afraid you were going to do anything, but like you couldn't be present for them. You couldn't like take care of them like you normally would. Like your
just kind of in a fog.
Yeah, your head was somewhere else, rightfully so. And I wanted to support you as best I could by being there and not leaving you to take care of our kids. But I was newer at my job. I'd only been there like a year. And I was like, my hands are tied. Like, I have to go to work. And so I tried to go in. And thankfully, like, my manager was there that day. And I kept going back and forth about if I should tell her what was happening. And, like, you kept saying, you can't talk to anybody. You can't tell anybody. We can't talk about this because of litigation and stuff. And is that the right word? Okay. And I was just like, okay, I can tell her something's going on. I don't have to give all the details and everything, but I think it's acceptable for me to like tell her we're going through something. And so that's what I did. I like called my boss and I was like, do you have a minute for me to talk to you? And I didn't think she could tell in my voice like something was not right. She's like, yeah, like come to my office. And I started crying, and nobody knew I was pregnant at work yet. I hadn't announced that I was pregnant. And I was like, my husband's a police officer. And I'm 14 weeks pregnant, by the way. And I don't know what to do. Is there any, I was like, I don't have PTO, like I didn't have a lot of PTO.
I forget this whole part.
And I'm like breaking down in my boss's office, telling her I'm pregnant, telling her my husband's been involved in a really serious incident at work, and I don't know what to do. And I mean, I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know if there's anything you can do for me. I understand if you can't, but I got to ask, is there any way? I don't know if you can help me at all, but I need help. And she just met me with so much grace and kindness, and like same thing with like your bosses at work, and like it just made such a difference. And like that's what you need the most in those times. And she figured out my work schedule. She took my days off that week so I could be with you. she was just so kind about it, and she asked to pray for me. And that was what I needed the most in that moment, not even knowing. Like, yes, I needed to be able to be with you. And yes, I needed grace and kindness, and to be able to get it off my chest and to be able to tell her what was going on felt great. But when she asked to pray for me, it was just like, that's what I need right now.
Yeah.
And she prayed for me, and it was just wonderful. And so fast forward, we're thinking about 1078. And I'll never forget that moment with my boss and how she met me in that moment. And I was like, I want to do that for these other wives, like these other spouses. Like, I want to be able to go and pray for them when they're not sure what to do.
Yeah. Like, sometimes people think that we had this like super like fantastic idea, and we're like, oh my God, we're going to do all these things. It's like, we truly, the way we developed 1078 is we went back to day one probably 100 times, and we're like, okay, well, this would have helped, or we didn't like this, or we didn't like that, or this really helped me, or this didn't help, or whatever else. And we just kind of like wrote it down, and we just kept making like adjustments of like, okay, well, we're going to do this. Like, we want to make sure that there's a spiritual component to this thing. Like, I was concerned about like where my relationship with God is after being involved in, like, unfortunately, the guy from my shooting, he died. And it's like, okay, well, what does God think about that?
Yeah,
it's like a big part of me. Yeah, like a big part of being comforted is like knowing, what does God think about this? And what are the, like, not what is this guy going to tell me, but like, what are the biblical truths? Like, where's the scripture for it? Or like your incident with somebody praying for you, or like, stepping back to like that first morning again is just like being back, putting the police officer back in control, because that first morning, like waking up is like, I think.
So we're standing in the kitchen and
we're like staring at each other, and
what next?
I'm also deaf. I think you were talking to me and I couldn't hear anything, and like my hearing was like completely gone. But it was one of those moments where I felt like
that was a funny
thing
that happened.
Yeah.
For you to lose your hearing like that. And I had no idea. Like I didn't even consider that.
Yeah.
And I'm like talking to you, and you're like not very far away from me. Like, we would normally have a conversation that far apart in the house. And you like look up at me, and I'm like, are you ignoring me? And you're like, what? And I'm like, I just had a full-on conversation with you. And you were like, I didn't hear anything. And I was like, I don't think you can hear. And you were like, I don't think I can either.
Yeah. We were like 5 feet away from each other. We were having a conversation, and I had no idea that you were even talking to me at all. Like, what'd you say?
It was crazy. Like, I'll never forget that too. That was crazy. Yeah. But yeah.
Just that feeling of like being out of control. So like, what did we do? Like with 1078, it's like, okay, well, let's put the cop back in control. Because police officers, no matter what everybody says, we want to be in control. We're control freaks. Most of us are A-type personalities. And I had no idea what was going on, and nobody ever really prepared me. There was no insight, and maybe that was me being naive. I don't know. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I missed. Maybe I didn't pay attention. It's something I should have paid attention to, but it's not an uncommon thing. I've talked to now 36 law enforcement families. And
it's a pretty common thing.
And most people are like, we have no idea what's going to happen from here. What's going to happen?
Yeah, it's not like a well-advertised thing when you're going through the academy or when you get a job at a police department. Like, hey, we're going to give you all this training on what to do if you have to fire your weapon, or if, you're in a bad situation, what to do. Like, you're going to know what to do. You're going to be prepared. But we're not going to tell you what to do after that.
Yeah, law enforcement
teaches you. You have no idea what comes after that. And
teach you how to shoot, move, and save your own life. But then when you have to do any of those things,
what comes next?
Then nobody tells you what's going to happen after.
That was, I think, where 1078 came from, was us standing there and being like, why do we not know what to expect? Why do you not? And I'm looking at you like, I'm not a cop. I don't know anything about any of this. Like, and you didn't know what was happening. And that, I think, was so hard to see the leader of my family being like scared. Like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Thanks for hanging in there till the end of the episode. I hope you guys are enjoying Kate's story. If you can't tell, there's more from Katelyn. Until next week, I'll see you on the other side, boys.